So let's kind of get into either a vignette or some area that you'd like to talk about. I gave you a few areas yesterday, so I'll let you choose. We can go to Iran. We can go to...
Let's go to Mexico.
Mexico? Okay,
Yeah.
go to Mexico.
Everybody's talking about Mexico lately.
Yeah.
You know? So understanding resilience and resistance, and in the book, I offer some ways to actually measure that. And I'm still refining those measures for the last few years. And I'm hoping to do an index soon that actually can be open source index, where you're looking at the resiliency of the state institutions and the resistance energy. By the way, I'm stealing that term from Brian Pettit. The resistance energy in those states. And when you're looking at intervening or U.S. foreign policy in our objectives and national security strategy in Mexico, it's very important to understand which factors are causing resistance energy in Mexico and which factors are important for domestic resiliency. Because if the U.S. does certain actions, it could undermine the resiliency of the Mexican government. And there are some people who call Mexico a failed state. Based on my definitions and all the analytics I'm doing, I don't see it as a failed state. I published on this recently in a journal looking at resiliency and resistance in Mexico. So we have objectives, which is to go after the cartels, and the Mexican government sees that as an internal problem, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
for them, and if U.S. intervenes in that, then they are interfering with their sovereignty,
Right.
and that will put Claudia Sheinbaum.
Be better if we were asked, but
yeah. Well, it will put her in a position,
yeah, well,
right? And so this all goes back. A lot of it goes back to Mexico's culture. Pancho Villa, the U.S. intervention in Mexico. There is a national. I mean, kids in Mexico are taught about Pancho Villa from a very young age, particularly if they're on the west side of Mexico. Right? He's like a national hero, and he's not a national hero because he was trying to fix Mexican government. He's not a hero because he stood up to the United States, right? And so it's very important to be looked on and viewed as a partner with Mexico. And so I think when we're looking at using military tools in Mexico, which are now authorized because there's 6 cartels that have been designated as foreign terrorist organization, that allows you to use military force. Doesn't mean you have to, but it's very important to understand the dynamics of we want to keep the current regime resilient, and which factors are the most important factors to target in decreasing the resistance energy. And hopefully one of the things that we learned over the last 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan is warheads and foreheads does not necessarily mean the resistance energy goes down. Or if it does, it just spikes for a moment and comes back up. So we need to look at a long-term strategy to create stability in Mexico and to fight drugs. And some of those policies might be domestic policies. Most of the guns in Mexico are coming from the United States. Not one person in the United States has been arrested or put in jail for that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in fact, Mexico tried to make that a court case. It went up and was pounded down by our Supreme Court. But there's a lot of ways to go after your objectives. But I think when you put the goggles on, the ones you really got to look at is this resistance and resilience model, and really kind of figure out how do I get national objectives completed and all the tools we have in our bag, which is a lot. We have a lot of tools in the bag as the United States.
Now, just framing it the way you talked about keeping the government resilient, right? I think it's got to be a forefront thought in any practitioner's mind when you start laying down.
The last 2 presidents have been mayors of Mexico City. This is not this. When you're looking at resiliency in Mexico, the major base of support for the central Mexican government is Mexico City. And there's always been a tension between that and the outlying states. So that's another thing that you got to really kind of work with, because the cartels understand that very well, right? That's why the Sinaloa cartel operates the way it does, is because it's controlling the local government where it's at. So it's a really tough problem set. It's really hard to get after it, but we need to expand our intellectual viewpoint on these hard challenges to get after them the best way, and it's going to take years.
Yeah, that's that was a good one. I mean, and there's a couple different problem sets up against that too. The demand signal from the United States, for narcotics, the border issues, and then the cartels that are using mules and whatnot to push it across. Let's jump a little bit more east and take a look at the Iranian issue, because that's been recent as well. The United States did an action to limit their nuclear capability, help out some partners and allies, if you will, and here we are, right?
Yeah, I did an analysis. It's in the book on Iran. I did that with Dave DiOrio, who is currently a mayor of a town, but he used to be one of the major players at National Defense University. There is a large amount of resistance energy in Iran. So far, it's manifested itself with a lot of nonviolent protests, which the Green Party, which occurred a few years ago. In fact, Marco Rubio was that was under the Obama administration. Marco Rubio was one of the biggest senators saying we need to support this green movement, but we didn't take a stand, for better or for worse. And then lately, you had the Women Life Freedom protests that occurred there. In both of those cases, there's some positives and negatives to the way that it was produced. I mean, if you go back and look at how to create a resistance, it had some things that could have been done better. So, but now that the targets in Iran and on the nuclear issue and Israel's involvement there, I think the U.S. needs to be very cautious about openly supporting resistance. The good time to support resistance is not when you're dropping warheads onto Iranian people, because anyone who is Iranian and is not supporting the nationalist idea of their nation while they're being threatened, right, isn't going to fare well in the country at the moment, right? So maybe there's things that you're looking for long-term change that you're supporting, but in all forms of change where the U.S. wants to be an external sponsor to change in Iran, which I would hope every American is on board with that. It's just how you go about it, and sometimes to do that, you need to look at the legitimacy of the resistance, right? If it looks like a U.S. proxy, it's not going to work. So it's just important to really account for that when you're looking at supporting resistance, and what's the best way for your partner, not your proxy, to be successful. And in the current environment, I think it's for the U.S. to support resistance very quietly and covertly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you could say our very strategic kinetic event was designed to keep the government in place.
Yeah, it could have helped reinforce the current government.
Could help, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think most Iranians, and luckily there's been a lot of great polling in Iran.
Yeah.
They all want to see change. Very progressive society. The women there are very empowered, and they don't like the rules that are being imposed on them with the type of laws and things, and the hard hand of the government in suppressing the people. And Iran's not one big, just like most countries. You're not all Persian, right? So you've got Kurds and all these other
ethnicities
folks,
that are
Baluchistan and other folks that are in the region,
left over from the Persian Empire,
right? But if you want real change,
yeah,
it's going to be with the Persians, right? So it's finding a group that maybe you can support, or hopefully you can offer some assistance to create some change in Iran, hopefully for the better. I think Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia and UAE was a really good move, because what it shows Iranians is this is what you're missing out on, and they are.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is just
he pulled off the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
The last tour of the White House, and these are big strategic
Sure.
messages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's possibility for changing Iran. Based on what I've seen, I don't think it's a successful one would be violent. It would be a nonviolent resistance movement that seems to have the most traction.
Yeah. And of course, nothing happens overnight. These things take time and evolve over time. So
That's right.
let's move a little bit further east.
Okay.
And take a look at, I like to talk about Taiwan, but you have to look at Hong Kong in the context of this, I think, and just kind of break those two down.
Sure.
There's some differences. So how would you look at this model and apply it to Hong Kong before and after the transition?
My dynamics are on interstate conflict. So I would look at China itself.
Right.
China has done some great messaging. One of them is this one China thing. We swallowed it too.
Yeah.
We've been drinking their Kool-Aid. All these models, by the way, that showed that their economy was going to outgrow the U.S. and all that stuff, all came to naught, and they were the ones sending all that stuff out. I mean, I don't know why we agreed to all this, but China, and I've got a article coming out in Prism from the Regular Warfare Center. It's supposed to be out in July, so it'll be out soon. That looks at China and resistance in China. It's surrounded by resistance. So you have the Hong Kong protests, which over 1 million people were protesting in the street. Really visible sign. Very well conducted. We can go back to that. Well conducted civil disobedience. You have Taiwan, which is this huge thorn in their side for the last 50 years or longer, right? Which we've done a very nuanced and I would say a very good job in supporting Taiwan. You've got Tibet, which has been occupied since the 1950s, which is a hotbed for resistance. Then you've got East Turkestan, and I don't know if you saw the East Turkestan resistance armed group that just came out of Syria.
I did not.
Very impressive, and all those are refugees from East Turkestan.
Oh wow!
So and over 1 million, anywhere between 500,000 and 500,000 people in East Turkestan are incarcerated. It's a whole crackdown on their culture, their religion, and all that. And then you have Inner Mongolia, right? So if you look at all that, the Han Chinese
have people with grievances.
Yeah, all around them, right? All around them. And so just like in Iran, though, I think real change is going to have to happen from the Chinese population, not the smaller groups. If you really, to get a really you need to have at least 15% of the population to support some type of resistance. You can't do that without the Han involved. So that's one of the key metrics I look at in China is how many Chinese are in the Communist Party and how many are not, and it's only like 8% or something that are in. So the rest of the 92% are disenfranchised, right? That's a really key metric, and it's not this big, huge Chinese guerrilla that we. Of course, it helps our defense industry and everything else to paint them that way. They have a lot of frailty in their government systems. And so those are things that we might want to look at. I would be cautious also, though, is do you want the CCP to collapse or not? Because
that's a good question.
You've got to think about what comes next.
Yeah, that's
Right.
That's a really good question because I don't think people understand what regime collapse means in a billion plus populated.
Yeah.
Right. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah.
Right. And I know we kind of line up with Taiwan and we watched what happened with Hong Kong. And of course, Taiwan has 90% of the silicone chip manufacturing for everything other than processors themselves. And it's a pretty good market, right? 23 million people that are also Chinese.
Yep.
Just happen to be part of the nationalists or Taiwanese.
They have a mixed opinion on themselves.
Yeah. That number keeps growing, I think, every year of nationalism, right?
Yeah, the DPP party,
right?
That's their mantra is because for a long time Taiwan was an alternate view of China, a democratic view of China, where they still held on to the fact that they would be able to change the mainland into holding their view of democratic China, and the new DPP party is like, no, we're just going to do our own state. It's going to be Taiwan. And so this seems to be a growing opinion there. Yeah, I mean it's such a complex diplomatic environment, political environment, and resistance environment. And I think we're doing a good job now at kind of analyzing that, but probably not in the resiliency resistance manner that we could.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of levers that we can pull to disrupt China if we want to. We just need to think about what our national security strategy is. And I think our support to Taiwan has been disruptive to the CCP for the last 50 years, and we've done a great job at that.
Yeah. You talk about levers, but there's impacts to those,
Yeah.
right? And for us, there's an economic tie that's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And you pull a lever, you watch the what do you call them? Graphics cards that
Yeah.
are being used for artificial intelligence servers and all those things. And then there's a ban. I think it's on the H100, H200 chip versus the H40 that they're allowed to have. Somebody have to fact check me on those.
I'm a social scientist, by the way, but I'll try to keep up.
Yeah. but it's literally that in Taiwan, they make the chips that get sent to mainland China to get manufactured in these AI
Big tie
cards.
between the two countries.
These AI cards get manufactured and then they get sent to NVIDIA to be distributed out, but they can't be sold back in China. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Right. How this all works. And that was just one example. I was doing a little research and I found like the economic ties are so interwoven and just weird.
And ours.
Yeah.
Ours are also tied with China. So
100%. So when you pull a lever, like, do we understand the complexity of that system, the relationships of everything in between?
This is the real difference between the Cold War and what in the period we're moving into.
Yeah.
Is that in the communist system, whatever it was, the Soviet Union had its own economy. It had its own, outside the rest of the world economy. Today's economies don't work that way. They've all been internationalized. And so in many ways, direct conflict with China looks much less probable because of, all the impacts that could happen. And so that's why I think that intrastate conflict and internationalized intrastate conflict in all these other places around the world, in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, that is where we're going to be competing with China because the direct fight with China is probably never going to happen.
I don't think so either. I think nobody wins that.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what the whole DoD is oriented towards.
Well, you have to be able to have the big stick, right?
That's true.
For deterrence.
Yeah. You want to keep your sovereignty. That's important.
Right. Like our goal is to never use that stuff, right? We do want to keep our sovereignty, but if you don't have the bullets, bombs, and super highly trained, best military force in the world,
right?
Nobody wants to mess with you. Nobody wants to, it's a great deterrence, right?
Mm-hmm. It is a great deterrent.
And I think that we have to at least exercise and move that way, that we never use it, right? That's the goal, is to never use it.
But we also got to see the rest of those irregular challenges, and we have to posture for them. And I think we haven't, and we're not doing that job to the extent that we should, because the world can change to a different place while we're just watching it change. So the places that we do want to support resistance or to support the resiliency of states, we need to really have a strategy for that. Or if we're just kind of waiting things out, I think Libya is a great example. Libya is still a partition state between two different factions. Are we really analyzing it and seeing the future where we might be able to influence change that supports our national security strategy, or are we just ignoring it? Hopefully it's not the latter, right? It's really understanding what's happening within the state and where we can affect change for the better of the world.
Maybe we ignore it, or maybe there's just too many priorities out there.
It's true.
Too many things to do at once.
We just had more SF to go out.
Yeah. I love our SF, man. They build the best relationships and partners, and Colombia is a great example of 100%. Special forces over years building relationships to where you get Colombian solutions, not U.S. solutions, Colombian solutions.
I'm not going to use his name, but I'm going to give a story by a 2-star who was at the beginning of the Colombian. We were going to send forces to Colombia. Most of them were from RSOF. And Congress said no more than 600 people. And he was like, that's crazy. Congress is full of it. They stuck with 600, and you know what? It worked.
Yeah.
You know, because you have to use your partner. When I was talking about the pretty toys on the wall,
Yeah.
you know, if you got, you know, JSOC and other toys there, those are the levers you pull, because the partner forces aren't as effective, right? But when you're forced to use your partner forces, it creates so much more resiliency within that environment of your partner's ability to do security for itself. And so one of the problems I think we had in Afghanistan in particular was we had too much U.S. force on the ground.
And we actually initially wanted a lot more.
Yeah. We only had another surge.
Like 700,000.
We just need more surges.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, that is great. Let me just ask you one more question to wrap this up here.
Sure.
What would you want our audience to leave with, understanding what your concepts are here that they can take away?
So there's a lot of concepts in this book that can help educate from an academic perspective, ways to look at resiliency and resistance within states. If you ever want to get a difference of opinion between two different SF teams, just ask one SF team member what UW means and what the other one means. Right? They're fighting in the street over the definition. Don't get caught up in that. Right? On this, this is just ways to kind of think about conflict, how we can better prepare for conflict. And what I loved about Paul Tompkins is, you know, I was actually the doctrine chief at the headquarters here when the new UW definition was resolved. Paul Tompkins always accepted everybody's opinion. He never said, no, you're wrong, you got to think this way. He was a mentor to everyone because he accepted and appreciated the way that they went about their great job. And I commend all great Americans who are serving in SOF today. Thank you for your service. But it doesn't have to just be about doctrine and getting everybody to think the same. Sometimes it's just thinking more broadly about a topic and being educated on it. And I hope that on the shelf, right, with the other books that you have on irregular warfare, this can sit there as well. It's a compendium to look at irregular warfare from a lens maybe that folks haven't used before. And I also want to thank Charles Cleveland, who read the entire book.
Love that guy.
And he gave back some great feedback,
Yeah.
and he wrote the foreword, and for supporting our efforts here, as well as all the other authors in the book. And I won't start naming them because I'll have to do all of them, but they all did a great job at compiling this book. And I hope it makes a mark, it makes an impact.
Rob, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
It's been a privilege for me. This is one of my favorite topics. I've been talking and teaching stuff around this all the time.
Yeah.
I just never framed it like this before. It's a huge deal for me to just sit down and talk with you. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike.
I know you got to fight traffic to go back
That's
over
right.
to USF, but it's really great having you here. And I'm going to just put this out. We'd love to have you back again.
Okay.
And maybe we bring an author or two from that.
Oh, that'd be
And we
great.
kind of peel something back in there.
Yeah, plus John Collison. He's just right over there
yeah.
in the J7. They
Yeah.
just stood up to J7, I guess.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
And just have you back, man, because this has been great. I think there's at least several more hours of
Sure.
discussion here for people that really want to deep dive this through our academic lens. But ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, thank you for sticking with us. Really appreciate it. If you like this content and want to see more content like that, check our channel out. Look at the other ones you see there, and hopefully you enjoyed this little fireside chat, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.